reading, comprehension, and basic writing skills. კითხვა, გაგება და ბაზისური წერითი უნარჩვევები. 2022 წელი. თ.ბაიაშვილი და մ.მელაძე. Lesson 2. მეორე გაკვეთილი. Coffee. In the Ethiopian highlands, where the legend of Kaldi, the goatherd, originated, coffee trees grow today as they have been growing for centuries. Though we will never know with certainty, there probably is some truth to the Kaldi legend. It is said that Kaldi discovered coffee after noticing that his goats, after eating berries from a certain tree, became so energetic that they did not want to sleep at night. Kaldi reported his findings to the abbot of the local monastery, who made a drink with the berries and discovered that it kept him alert for the long hours of evening prayer. Soon the abbot shared his discovery with the other monks at the monastery, and ever so slowly knowledge of the energizing effects of the berries began to spread. As word moved east and coffee reached the Arabian Peninsula, it began a journey which spread its reputation throughout the world. The Arabs were the first not only to cultivate coffee, but also to begin its trade. By the 15th century, coffee was being grown in the Arabs were the first not only to cultivate coffee, but also to begin its trade. By the 15th century, coffee was being grown in the Yemeni district of Arabia, and by the 16th century it was known in Persia, Egypt, Syria, and Turkey. Coffee was not only drunk at homes, but also in many public coffee houses called kavahana, which began to appear in the cities across the Near East. The popularity of the coffee houses was incomparable, and people often visited them for all kinds of social activity. They drank coffee and engaged in conversation. At the same time, They listened to music, watched performers, played chess, and kept up to date on the news of the day. In fact, they quickly became such an important center for the exchange of information that the coffee houses were often referred to as schools of the wise, with thousands of worshippers visiting the holy city of Mecca each year from all over the world. The fame of the wine of Araby, Araby, as the drink was often called, was beginning to spread far beyond Arabia. In an effort to keep its complete monopoly in the early coffee trade, the Arabians continued to closely guard their coffee production. European travelers to the Near East brought back stories of the unusual dark black beverage. By the 17th century, coffee had made its way to Europe and was becoming popular across the continent. Opponents were too cautious, calling the beverage the bitter invention of Satan, bitter invention of Satan. With the coming of coffee to Venice in 1615, the local clergy criticized it. The disagreement was so great that Pope Clement the Eighth was asked to get involved. Before making a decision, however, he decided to taste the beverage for himself. He found the drink so satisfying that he gave it papal approval. Despite such disagreement in the major cities of England, Austria, France, Germany, and Holland, coffee houses were quickly becoming centers of social activity and communication. In England, penny universities developed very quickly. They were called penny universities because for the price of a penny, one could buy a cup of coffee and engage in stimulating conversation. By the mid-17th century, there were over 300 coffee houses in London. many of which attracted sponsors with common interests such as merchants, shippers, dealers, and artists. Many businesses grew out of these specialized coffee houses. Lloyd's of London, for example, came into existence at the Edward Lloyd's Coffee House. In the mid-1600s, coffee was brought to New Amsterdam, a location later called New York by the British. Though coffee houses rapidly began to appear, tea continued to be the favorite drink in the New World until 1773, when the colonists revolted against a heavy tax on tea imposed by King George. The revolt, known as the Boston Tea Party, forever changed the American drinking preference to coffee. As demand for the beverage continued to spread, there was tense competition to cultivate coffee outside of Arabia. Though the Arabs tried hard to maintain their monopoly, the Dutch finally succeeded in the latter half of the 17th century to obtain some seedlings. The first attempts to plant them in India failed, but they were successful with their efforts in Batavia on the island of Java, in what is now Indonesia. The plants grew well, and soon the Dutch had a productive and growing trade in coffee. They soon expanded the cultivation of coffee trees to the islands of Sumatra and the islands of Sumatra and Celebes. Today, coffee is grown in a number of countries around the world. Whether it is Asia or Africa, Central or South America, the islands of the Caribbean or Pacific, all can discover the heritage in the trees in the ancient coffee forests on the Ethiopian plateau.